Many artists I work with want to create deep space and have dynamic movement in their paintings. And yet they struggle with understanding how to use line, color, shape, value, and texture to express that sense of space in their work. So if this is something that you struggle with as well, I really hope that this video will help you understand how to use visual language so that your inner expression and the meaning that you want to convey through having deep space in your work is something that you can do. Hey everyone, I'm Marianne Mitchell. Welcome to Whole Artist Mastery. What exactly is Whole Artist Mastery? Well, it means learning to own your artistic voice, making compelling work, and knowing how you want to show up in the world as an artist. So I love sharing my wealth of expertise that I've gathered over the 40 years I've been a professional fine artist. And I hope that it helps you grow as an artist. So if you like what you see, you can help the Whole Artist Mastery YouTube channel grow itself by liking this video and subscribing to the channel. So I always ask artists who are working with me, why is it that you want to create a sense of deep space in your work? And what is it that you're trying to express by doing that? Because it always roots back to, why are you inspired by what you're inspired by? And how does that inform your particular use of visual language? So how do you use line, color, shape, value, and texture together to create a sense of moving way back in the piece, or to stay rather shallow on the surface and everything in between? Because the 5 elements of visual language all work together to create different kinds of space. So I'm going to use 5 pieces of mine to show you in each piece that is very different from each other how I'm using line, color, shape, value, and texture to create different kinds of space and dynamic movement. So the first piece that I'm going to talk about is titled Becoming Intangible. So as you look at this piece, it's very pristine and somewhat minimalistic in its shape relationships, its value relationships, and color relationships. But it was really born out of total reckless abandon. So when the black shape appeared through various marks and, again, totally unaware of what I was going to do with this piece, I was captured by the contrast between the dark, the black, square-ish piece and the white spaces that were all the way around. And so what I'm doing with this piece is I'm creating a sense of deep space, both with the value organization of having the darkest dark, the lightest light right next to each other, and the mid-tone right in between, so that the lightest light in the piece is the white shape that's going on a diagonal line down in front of the mid-tone shape, so that the space is being created both because of the value relationship between the lightest light and the mid-tone value, as well as because the lightest light usually is in front of any value that's behind it, or any darker value. But this is also creating deep space because the line, the edge of the white, is overlapping both the mid-tone value as well as the dark shape, the black shape behind it. So that the space, once again, is being created because of the value organization of the darkest dark, the lightest light, and the mid-tone value being organized in such a way that the lightest light is on front, the next value that's behind that is the mid-tone, and the furthest back value is the darkest value. And this is because the white shape, the edge of the white shape, is clearly overlapping the midtone value shape. Now I'm also creating space here with perspective, which means that no line is parallel to any other line. So together the lines are making your eye move from left to right and top to bottom because of their angles and how those angles are working together to create a sense of dynamic movement in the piece. Now, this next piece is titled Containing Infinity. And what I was working with in this piece, which took a very long time to begin to speak to me and come together in a composition, but when it did start to come together, what I was compelled by was this sense of three shapes coming together that through the colors and the value organization had a sense of infinite depth, really. That when you look at this blue, you feel like you can go way back. And that's because both the yellow line is in front of the blue, but also because of the vibration between the yellow and the blue, which are the two most intense colors in the bottom slightly left of center of the piece, or if you're looking at this slightly right of center. I'm getting my right and left mixed up, which is pretty usual for me. Anyway, where the brightest yellow is and the darkest blue is the highest vibration of color relationship, which creates a sense of movement in the color. And the brilliance of those two colors is being held by the reflected blue over on the edge, the right edge of the painting, as well as the yellow being held by the reflected yellow over on the left edge, upper left quadrant, and the lower right quadrant. Those are both reflecting colors of the intensity of the blue and yellow. So this vibration between the two colors, the intensity of the colors being held by the reflected colors, is creating a sense of depth in the piece. Now, the other thing that's creating a sense of depth is the relationship between the most intense value contrast between the lightest light and the darkest dark in the upper right quadrant, and the most intense color contrast down in the lower left quadrant. So they're both the most intense relationship of their particular element, but in terms of color and value. They're not the same. In other words, the upper right quadrant relationship is not about color, it's about value. The lower left quadrant relationship is not about value, it's about color. But in each case, they are most extreme in their relationship to each other. The next painting is titled Whispering Walls. So I titled it this because there's really a sense of history here in all the layers of texture that are very rough as well as very smooth. So as you look at the painting, you can see that there's a lot of very rough texture, but then behind it, on the right side of the center, before you get to the shape on the right side, the texture is smooth. So there's a sense of coming forward with the rough texture and going back with the smooth texture. The other thing I wanted to point out here is how the line in the bottom third or the bottom quarter of the painting moves in the way the value or the shadow underneath the line changes width. So there's this little black line underneath the white shape that sits on top of the black line. And at each end, the line is slightly wider than it is in the middle, where it almost disappears. But the left side of the line is thinner than the right side of the black line. So that creates movement all the way along that line. No one place is the same as another place as that line moves across. The other thing that's creating a sense of movement in the piece is a very, very light pinkish cast in the upper left quadrant on top of the white, and the very, very light greenish cast in the bottom right quadrant at the bottom of the large white shape. And before I glazed a little bit of pink and a little bit of green there, that whole shape was flat. So just a little bit of very muted, soft, almost imperceptible color relationships can make a big difference in how white can come across as having depth. And then clearly the little black shape in the sort of at the bottom of the lower left quadrant is the smallest shape inside the largest shape of the entire composition. So there's a real depth of movement, both in terms of value and shape in that relationship. This painting is titled Complimentarity. And I titled it that because to me, it obviously has some ties to a landscape composition, even though it was completely uninformed by landscape. It just sort of came about this way. But I'm showing you this because of the sense of moving back in space, precisely because it's organized in a landscape structure. So the big shape is in the foreground, the middle size shape is in the middle, and the smallest shape is the farthest away. So you get a sense of moving back way across, it's almost like looking out across the land, and, standing in front of yourself is this big grassy foreground, and then you see this little tiny house way out beyond where you're standing. I had this experience one time out in Wyoming years and years ago. I was sitting up on a plateau looking out across miles and miles of land, and way out there was this tiny little tractor trailer driving down the road, which of course if I had been up close it would have been huge. So this painting, through its shape organization from the bottom to the top, gives you that sense of moving way back in space. The reason it's called complementarity is because there are a lot of complementary color relationships as well as shape relationships, which I was just talking about. So the complementary color relationships are the blue and the orange, the yellow and the very dark purple of the black shape, and the reflected yellow in the upper left quadrant from the bright yellow in the lower right quadrant, and the very pearlescence blue in the upper right quadrant, talking to the orangey colors in the lower left quadrant. So there are a lot of complementary relationships, both in terms of opposite colors, complement colors, as well as opposite strength and reflected colors. I'm talking about this last painting, which is titled There, because first of all, it is a piece that pretty much everybody who sees it is really moved by it. You might be one of the few people who are not, and that's entirely fine. But I wanted to talk about how space is created in this piece, because to me, the bright color you would think would be something that comes forward, and it's right in the center of the painting. But because of the white shape to the left of the bright or squarish shape, is on top of the blue, and it goes down below the bottom edge of the square. So it reads as though it's coming forward. The bottom edge of the white shape and the bottom edge of the blue-yellow shape are also in relationship in terms of creating perspective. They're both moving towards the same point way out on the left side. So it feels as though the left shape is is more in front of the bright blue-yellow central shape. On the right side of the painting, the orange reads as though it's in front of the black. Now, as I'm saying this, I'm realizing that some people might disagree with me, and I've learned that people see things coming forward and things going backwards differently. So I would love to hear in the comments below whether you see this painting differently, whether you see that the black is coming forward and the orangey ochre on the right side is going back, or whether you see the orangey ochre coming forward and the black going back. Let me know how you see it. Anyway, it has a sense of dynamic movement in the composition, even though there's a very central focal point with the brightest color in the middle. And that was very much determined by me because this was actually made during lockdown in 2020 during the pandemic. And I wanted there to be this anchor of hope in the center of the unknown, which is being expressed by the black and the gray-white and the brown earthy tones down below. So there's a sense of, I want to be there, or are we there yet? Or, gosh, I think I'm finally there in creating this painting. It took a really long time to get this painting to work properly. So, but it's my true expression of that experience of wanting so desperately to have a sense of hope during that lockdown period in a time of total unknownness. So I hope this was helpful, and a good video to watch after this one is developing an abstract painting, the integration phase. And what that one talks about is how you integrate your intention, your feeling, your emotional connection to a painting with these compositional decisions that you have to make in order to have the meaning be conveyed through your visual grammar. Just like when we're writing something, we need to use verbal grammar. We need to use grammar in a structural kind of way to express our meaning. And certainly writers use grammar in a lot of different ways. But the difference in the way that they use grammar has everything to do with who they are and why they want to say what they want to say and how they're using words to do that. And so we're doing the same thing with visual grammar. So this is just one aspect of expressing an intention in a piece in terms of having a sense of depth in the painting. So if you go watch the integration phase piece video, that will help you understand how these things come together, how the intention and going back into a piece can work together. So, thanks so much. I hope this was helpful. And again, I look forward to seeing you in the next video.